Okay, so you know when you want to get really into a topic, like properly understand it, but there's just so much stuff.
Right. It can be overwhelming.
Exactly. Well, that's what we do here, and today we're diving into Beatlemania.
Yeah, that incredible wave, wasn't it? The fan thing around the Beatles, like 63 to 66.
That's the one. And we've got some really interesting source material here.
We do. Excerpts, basically, that take us through the whole journey. How it started, how intense it got, the impact it had.
So the mission today.
Is pretty much to pull out the key bits, the really surprising stuff. That helps explain, well, what was Beatlemania and why are we still talking about it?
All right, let's get into it. So the sources say it all kicked off in the UK, late 63.
Yeah, with those early singles.
No.
Please, please me. From me to you.
And She Loves You, of course. That one was massive.
Oh, absolutely. And what's wild is how fast the press, the British press, jumped on it.
Really, that quickly.
Yeah, by October 63, I mean, that's quick. The term Beatlemania was already like a thing.
Yeah.
They needed a word for just how crazy the fan reaction was at concerts.
It wasn't just normal cheering then.
No, definitely not. Something else entirely.
And then boom, just a few months later, February 64, they're huge in the States.
Totally. Top 2 spots on Billboard.
Yeah.
I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You.
That kind of chart dominance is just, wow.
It really is. And there's this great story, well, revealing story in our source. The person who did them before, right before they were famous.
Mm-hmm.
And they go to a show in 63, and it's just, well, deafening, this screaming.
Couldn't hear a thing, I bet.
Exactly. And they ask this fan, like, why aren't you listening? And the fan just goes, oh, we came to see them. We can hear them on the records.
Wow.
Anyway, she says, we might be disappointed if we heard them in real life.
That says so much, doesn't it? It wasn't about the music at that point, not entirely. It was about them, their presence.
Precisely. It feels like a real shift, maybe, in how fans connected. More visual, more about the persona.
That's a really interesting angle. It wasn't just a concert anymore. And even really early on, like that first nationwide tour, Feb 63,
Opening for Helen Shapiro, yeah.
they were already causing a stir, even as the opening act.
They were, and it just kept building. That second tour with Tommy Rowe and Chris Montez.
An American guy.
Yeah, established American stars. But the Beatles just completely stole the show. Their popularity just exploded past the headliners.
Imagine being those guys. Bit awkward.
You think? But it shows how fast things were moving. And it's cool that McCartney apparently thought of songs like From Me to You and Thank You Girl as being, directly for the fans.
Building that connection.
Definitely. And Bob Stanley's point in the source is important, too, that the Beatles offered this kind of liberation.
For both guys and girls.
Yeah, seemed like it. Boys could be loud. Girls had something exciting, maybe a bit rebellious to latch onto.
And then She Loves You. The source calls it the song that brought it to the boil.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the ooh. Apparently that just sent fans into a frenzy. Pure delirium, the source said.
500,000 advance orders for that single. That's insane.
Shattered records. Became an anthem. But the big moment, the one where Beatlemania really cemented itself in public view.
Let me guess, the London Palladium.
You got it.
Yeah.
Val Parnell's Sunday night at the London Palladium, October 63. 15 million people watching on TV.
15 million. That's just staggering for 63.
Right. Their publicist, Tony Barrow, basically said that was the launch pad when the media couldn't ignore it anymore.
Though the source mentions someone else claiming they coined the term earlier, a Scottish promoter.
Andy Lothian, yeah. Seems there's a bit of debate. The Daily Mail used it in a headline later that month, too.
But whoever said it first, it stuck. It captured something real.
Absolutely. And then their first trip abroad to Sweden, also in October 63, that just amplified things.
And return, London airport. 10,000 fans.
Screaming fans, yeah. Apparently, they totally ignored Miss World, who was there at the same time.
Priorities.
And Ed Sullivan was there, too, got held up by the crowds and famously asked, who the hell are the Beatles?
Iconic. You couldn't write it.
It really shows you the scale, doesn't it? And that autumn tour, November 63, their first time headlining properly.
That's when things got even more intense.
Oh, yeah. Riotous is the word used. Yeah. Police using water hoses sometimes to control crowds.
Water hoses, seriously.
Yeah.
And the noise. That Cheltenham show where they couldn't hear themselves.
Yeah. Just imagine playing music you literally cannot hear because of the screaming.
Mind-blowing. And some of the comparisons being made back then?
Yeah. The Daily Telegraph comparing it to Hitler's Nuremberg rallies.
Which is a strong comparison. It speaks to the scale, I guess, but Feels a bit off.
It definitely highlights the intensity and the visual aspect of these huge crowds. But yeah, the mood was surely different.
Right. And then you get the total opposite, like a clergyman suggesting they record O Come All Ye Faithful.
Talk about trying to tap into the zeitgeist. Shows how big they were.
And Maureen Lipman's story, the road to Damascus moment at a concert, and that maybe legendary story about the underwear.
The 40 pairs of abandoned knickers.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably apocryphal, but it paints a picture, doesn't it? The sheer frenzy.
Total frenzy. And yet somehow they're still doing Christmas shows, putting out fan club records.
Always connecting. And releasing a new album for Christmas became a thing, didn't it? Fans having listening parties.
Making them part of the yearly traditions. So end of 63, Beatlemania is massive in the UK. But America, different story initially.
Yeah, the U.S. press seemed kind of amused by it all. Like, oh, those quirky Brits.
Headlines like The New Madness, almost patronizing.
A bit. And that Baltimore Sun piece saying, Beatles go home. That totally backfired, didn't it?
Probably just made teens love them more. Like, see? The adults don't get it.
Classic. But their first TV spots in the U.S. were fairly quiet, right? Huntley Brinkley, CBS Morning News.
Relatively low-key, though that CBS piece got more attention later after the Kennedy assassination.
Right. There's that theory, or observation, that the Beatles arrived at a time when America really needed something. Uplifting. Fun. After such a national trauma.
A distraction, maybe? A bit of light?
Possibly. Plus, all the other anxieties floating around the Cold War, civil rights tensions. Maybe they just felt fresh and exciting. But the real catalyst in the U.S. was that DJ, Carol James.
In Washington, D.C., yeah. Playing I Want to Hold Your Hand.
And suddenly, bam. Phones ringing constantly, stores swamped with requests for a record they didn't even have yet.
Viral before viral was a thing.
Totally. Capitol Records had to rush it out. Straight to #1.
And then Ed Sullivan booking them sealed the deal.
That was it. Capitol poured money into marketing them.
And the descriptions of the concerts. Slightly orgiastic, urine-soaked seats.
Yeah, pretty vivid.
Yeah.
And David Holbrook's memorable take on it being a masturbation fantasy.
Okay, strong words. Shows the intense reactions, good and bad.
Definitely provoked something visceral.
Yeah.
And then the arrival. February 7th, 1964. JFK.
4,000 fans waiting. Just madness. Reports of injuries, even.
And that constant fan presence outside hotels, everywhere they went. The source calls it an extra dimension. It wasn't just a scheduled event.
It was relentless, a 247 circus.
Pretty much. And then the first Ed Sullivan show. February 9th.
73 million people watching.
73 million. Biggest TV audience ever in the U.S. up to that point.
Just hard to wrap your head around those numbers. Then the first concert in Washington, Carnegie Hall.
They just conquered America.
Yeah.
Like lightning.
Second Sullivan show from Miami, another 70 million viewers. Then back to the UK.
Met by another 10,000 fans at Heathrow. It was nonstop.
And the New York Times Magazine calling it a religion of teenage culture. That feels significant.
Yeah, marking that shift, young people looking to their own generation, not just adults, for cues, for identity. It was bigger than just pop music.
Definitely a cultural moment. And that connection people make to the Kennedy assassination, the timing.
It's plausible, isn't it? A need for excitement, possibility after such darkness. Plus, as we said, nuclear fears, racial tensions, Vietnam starting to bubble up. The Beatles were an escape, maybe. Something positive.
It's a potent mix of factors.
Right.
And then April 4th, 64, the charts.
Oh, yeah. Holding the top 5 spots on the Billboard Hot 100.
All 5. Has that even happened since? Maybe once or twice.
It's incredibly rare. It just shows total domination. And that opened the floodgates for...
The British invasion, all the other bands following them over.
Exactly. A massive cultural shift. And this whole pattern chart, success, fan mania, it just repeated everywhere they went globally.
Hotel sieges, stealing souvenirs, armored cars. Sounds intense.
More like a military campaign than a tour, yeah. The source hints at the contrast, their clean public image versus these wild private parties. Lennon later compared to Fellini's Satyricon.
Whoa, Satyricon. That's quite a comparison. Decadent, over the top.
Gives you a sense of the pressure, the weirdness of it all, maybe.
Then Australia, June 64. Treated like royalty, basically.
Yeah. National event, yeah. That parade in the rain, and that bizarre, awful story about the woman throwing her baby.
At McCartney. What even possesses someone?
It's terrifying. Shows the almost godlike status fans projected onto them. Ringo's quote about them working miracles. Maybe not entirely a joke. It tapped into something deep, maybe desperate, in some fans.
And the crowds. 300,000 in Adelaide. bigger than for the Queen.
Unbelievable numbers. Melbourne was huge, too. People getting hospitalized in the crush. It was dangerous.
Clearly unlike anything before. And Lennon doing those controversial gestures on stage.
The Nazi salute, mocking the Pope, starting to push boundaries even then.
And the jelly baby throwing, all because Harrison mentioned liking them once.
Yep. Fans latching on to anything. Imagine being pelted with sweets every night.
Just bizarre. New Zealand sounded rough, too. Not enough police protection.
Yeah, led to some scary situations. That story about the fans slashing her wrists at the hotel, it's incredibly dark.
It really is. Shows the dangerous edge to all that adoration. The line getting very blurry.
And as we get into this peak mania period, you really see the toll it's taking.
Right, like with the A Hard Day's Night movie. It was about being trapped by fame.
And real-life Beatlemania actually made filming it a nightmare.
Kind of ironic. And the concert scenes were apparently toned down.
Some critics thought so, yeah. Didn't capture the raw chaos. And the premieres. London, 12,000 fans clogging up Piccadilly Circus. Liverpool, similar scenes. Lennon still doing those salutes.
Ringo saying they felt like living gods around then. What does that do to your head?
Hard to imagine. And the album for the film, just pure adrenaline, fueling the fire even more.
Then the second U.S. tour, August '64. And they insisted on no segregated audiences.
Which was significant, but the hysteria.
Yeah.
Apparently even worse than the first time.
George Martin's quote about recording the Hollywood Bowl concert, like trying to record next to a 747 jet.
Gives you an idea of the noise level. And Chicago police saying it was like Sinatra multiplied by 50 or 100, just off the charts.
And more reports of fans getting hurt, genuinely distressed.
Yeah. And a Harrison saying no to ticker tape parades after Kennedy shows they were aware of the risks. But they had no escape, locking themselves in hotel bathrooms for peace.
That's just bleak. No privacy at all. And even though the tour made bank, the New York Times criticized them for creating a monster audience.
That's a pretty harsh assessment, but maybe understandable from a certain viewpoint. The loss of control was palpable.
And the comparisons to religion kept coming.
Yeah, their press officer, Derek Taylor, maybe leaned into that a bit with his descriptions. Jonathan Miller saying they became a religion when they weren't around.
And commentators worrying about creeping adult adolescence.
Yeah.
Adults getting swept up too.
Seems like it. Those blurring lines everywhere. And then the meeting with Bob Dylan.
Huge moment, musically, culturally.
Yeah, bridging folk and rock, those two worlds. Dylan apparently got it, though, seeing the chaos around them, saying, this is Beatlemania here.
He recognized it was something unique, and Capitol Records milking it with that documentary LP, The Beatles Story.
First, keep the narrative going. Then help. The movie in '65, more tours, France, Italy, Spain, another U.S. tour.
But the press started shifting then, more focus on the music itself.
Yeah, particularly in the U.S. Less gawking at the fans, more actual appreciation of their songwriting, their sound. They were being taken more seriously as artists.
Which must have been a relief. And then, Shea Stadium, August '65.
The big one. First time a rock band played a huge outdoor stadium like that. 55,000 people?
Record attendance, record money. The New York Times called it pandemonium.
Even the band seemed blown away. Ringo talking about Lennon just losing it during I'm Down, playing piano with his elbows, like it was all just too absurd.
A surreal moment. But not everyone was celebrating. The Christian conservatives.
Oh yeah, Bob Larson, David Nobel.
Yeah.
That pamphlet, Communism, Hypnotism, and the Beatles.
Wow, linking them to communism, hypnotism,
which shows the fear they generated in some quarters. And Lennon getting frustrated with fans bringing sick kids backstage expecting miracles. The pressure must have been immense.
Getting MBEs from the Queen, another surreal peak. With the usual chaos outside.
But it was getting impossible to do live TV, so they started making those promo films instead.
Ahead of their time, really. Music videos before music videos.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah.
Allowed them to focus on the studio. And then Rubber Soul came out, December '65.
A big shift musically. More complex, more grown-up.
Yeah, definitely challenged some of the pop fans. Marked a new phase, artistically and in that fan relationship.
And the cover, that stretched out photo. People noticed the change in their look, too.
They did. And back in the UK, whispers started. Maybe it's ending. Less touring, no Christmas show that year.
Mixed signals, though. Some papers saying Beatlemania's over, others, it's back during that UK too.
Definitely a transition period. And you get the sense the Beatles themselves were itching to break out of the mold by '66.
Which brings us to the Butcher cover.
Oof, yeah. That photo session with Robert Whittaker. Raw meat, broken dolls. Very deliberate shock tactic.
Trying to shatter that clean image. Commenting on the mania itself, maybe?
Possibly both. It certainly got a reaction.
Hmm.
And their final UK show was May 1st, '66. Polls suggesting the mania was fading because they weren't as visible.
Seems plausible. But those last international tours, Germany, Japan, the Philippines, they sound like a nightmare.
Pretty much. Tear gas in Germany due to death threats, controversy over playing the Budokan in Japan, and the Philippines. Snubbing Imelda Marcos, riots, getting chased out of the country.
It's just awful. Harrison remembered feeling genuine violence in the air on those tours.
Yeah, and then perfectly timed for their final U.S. tour in August '66, the more popular than Jesus storm breaks.
Lennon's comment caused way more fuss in the U.S. than the U.K., right?
Massively more.
Yeah.
Protests, record burnings, KKK pickets. It was intense, even though the original UK context was less inflammatory.
Still, talk about pouring gasoline on the fire, fans threatening to jump off buildings in New York, clashes outside their hotel.
Total chaos. And the U.S. press started saying maybe their wealth, their weird art rock stuff, is turning off the teens.
And then Candlestick Park, San Francisco, August 29th, 1966, the last show.
The end of the touring era. After over 1,400 gigs.
Incredible. And the source says the screaming was less at that final one, more unified.
Seems like it. But they were done. Utterly fed up with touring, the noise, the lack of privacy, the fact they couldn't replicate their studio sound live.
Harrison was over at first, then McCartney agreed.
Yeah. Lennon called the concerts tribal rights. Harrison compared it to being trapped in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Wow, that's a powerful image. Trapped in madness.
Ringo just said they quit at the right time.
So after 66, it was all studio. But some younger fans drifted after Revolver, found it too weird.
Apparently so, in the U.S. at least, which interestingly opened the door for
The Monkees, designed to capture that teen audience, copying the early Beatles film vibe.
Exactly. The pop machine keeps rolling.
Yeah.
So what happened to the actual mania after they stopped touring? Did it just evaporate?
Not completely, it seems. It definitely scaled back after 66 and into their solo stuff. The cartoon kept the old image alive for a bit.
But the band members were off doing their own things more. Less of a unified front. Christmas sales dropped off.
And they sounded pretty disillusioned with fame in interviews around then.
Ringo calling the image a trap, Lennon wanting a nice downfall.
Yeah, they sounded tired of it.
And then Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane in early '67, the promo films with mustaches.
That blew some fans' minds. Just seeing them with facial hair was a shock.
And the single didn't hit #1 in the UK. First time in ages. Cue the Is It Over headlines.
Right. But in the U.S., the critics actually loved the experimental stuff. That's when the source talks about adult Beatlemania starting.
A different kind of appreciation. Less screaming, more listening.
Maturing fans? Maybe. And then Straight Pepper landed in May 67. Game changer.
Totally revolutionized everything. But even then, you still had echoes. Fans protesting at Shea Stadium because there were no concerts.
Yeah, 2,000 of them in August 67. And the Magical Mystery Tour filming still drew crowds, sometimes chaotic ones.
But the last big screaming fan event was probably the Yellow Submarine premiere in '68. Seems like it. And that rare time they filmed Hey Jude with fans in the studio. Actor Mark Sinden saying it felt like being in the presence of God shows their status by then.
They'd become more than just pop stars. Icons, symbols of the 60s counterculture, activism.
Definitely. And that later study seeing Beatlemania as early proto-feminism, girl power.
Young women finding a collective voice, challenging norms through this intense fandom. Derek Taylor calling it the 20th century's greatest romance. It was deep.
It really was. And later bands had their own Canamanias, Pulomania, Rollermania.
Similar patterns, right? Screaming, queuing, collecting stuff.
Yeah, those tropes repeat. But the experts quoted in our source seem to agree. Nothing else quite matched the scale, the depth, the global impact of Beatlemania.
It was unique, a perfect storm.
It seems that way. Andre Millard concluding was just unrepeatable.
So wrapping it up, Beatlemania started fast, burned incredibly bright, swept the world, changed culture, and then kind of morphed as the band changed.
We saw those key moments, the shift from listening to seeing, the social backdrop, the controversies, the legacy.
It's a lot to take in.
Indeed. And this kind of leaves us wondering, for you listening, Beatlemania was such a perfect storm, right? Social stuff, cultural shifts, the media.
Everything just hit at once.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So could something like that, exactly like that, ever happen again? Or is fan stuff just different now in our world?
Yeah, something to chew on.